Hey, what's up, guys? This is Brian from Whisper Status 74, and this video is on vertical banding. I've done several videos on this topic, and in those videos, I was just kind of highlighting the most, I would say, best situation where you get vertical banding or dirty screen effect, and when it's too much, when you should bring your display back. Now, Resident Evil and some of the other games I've done, the other one was, I believe, God of War, in some of the dingier gray scenes, and the other one was Little Nightmares, where there's a lot of fog and there's a lot of other perfect storms that create what you see as vertical banding. Now, what I mean by vertical banding is, and this is the kind of game with the perfect lighting to see it. Now, I'm also very close to a 75-inch TV. It's what you're looking at right now, which is the Sony 900E. Now, this display is very clean. In all the vertical banding tests, nothing shows up. But why does it show up at all? Well, what you have is zones. For local dimming, you have a number of zones. The higher end the TV, the higher the amount of zones, and the less blooming you should see, and the less banding you should see. As the zones are closer together, there are more of them. The 900E has less zones than the 940E and the Z9D. I think a little less than the 900F. I'm not sure about the current displays. But where you see some of the banding is as if there was some light in between those zones. It's not really coming up on the camera, but I will tell you that it is here. And it is very distracting. However, when you know you're in trouble, and I'll preface this with in trouble to the point to where your display has to go back, is if you see it in all content. Now, I'm trying to get a situation where you can see it. Alright, so let's go by this light right here. And if you pan, you might see little tiny lines to the left above the table. Or right, so if I move quick, you can see a little bit. You can see them a little bit. Now, is that something to take your TV back for? Yes and no. How can I say? I'm scary as hell. Yes and no. What I mean by that is if you have a one particular band, it's only in one specific spot, it's always there, and you see it in all content, that display has to go back. Looking at a boot. So what I mean is, if you see that content on a game or a movie that's very colorful, very striking, and you see that banding, then there's an issue. Typically, I've only really noticed banding on these displays, be it all my 4K displays, were when HDR was enabled, as the high dynamic range feature of this display definitely pumps the brightness more than it should, and it makes it more evident. I typically don't notice it with high dynamic range off, however, it is something you need for HDR. So those of you watching this, you're thinking to yourself, well, okay, do I bring my display back? Again, if you see that in all content, if you see it in the exact same spot, that's not banding that's due to your local dimming. That's a defect in the screen. So if you're looking at this screen, and there's a huge band right here, and it's there through all your content, regardless of it being a 15% gray or white background. If that's there during all colors, that's a defective panel. If you do see some banding or some artifacting in some content, be it a little bit gray, a little bit white, that's typically when it'll show up. Then that's really your call, but I would say just about every display out there has it. Now, before everybody puts in the comments that they don't have anything like that on your display, it's nearly impossible to get a clean one, especially over 65 inches. If you follow Artings.com, they preface just about every review with larger displays have more banding and more screen uniformity issues. If you look at their OLED reviews, just about every one of them has a little disclaimer that there is some banding on gray or white screens. Now, that's different. It's not. They emit their own light, so it's different than the local dimming you see on an LED. but you get the same effect. So my point is, if you get transfixed on it, it'll make you crazy. If it only shows up in some content, be it a game like this, which doesn't really have great blacks. It's a very washed out, muddy looking game. It's not a good looking game by any means. You're seeing this on the Xbox One X. It is in 4K. But there's only going to be certain, if you look at the top of the screen, you can see some of it. There's only going to be certain content where you see it. Particularly gray, as white turns to gray, foggy scenes with light permeating behind them, things like that is where you're going to see it. And if you don't see it in other content, you're good. If you don't see it in movies, you're fine. But again, if you see that in every content or piece of content you have, then you're in trouble. Just like blooming. If you see blooming or light bleed in the same spot of your display, that's a flaw. If it's there and then it goes away and it's somewhere else, that's blooming. So that's my quick video on vertical banding. You can see a little bit here. It's uniformed. I don't think it'd be different if I took this one back. I did take back my 940E. It had a huge band down the middle of the screen. Some of you with 900Fs have said you had a band down the screen. Some of you guys now with Q9FNs have had some banding. So kind of run some banding tests, see if you see it on any of those tests, and then think to yourself, in what content are you really seeing it? Are you seeing it all the time? Are you seeing it just in the kind of content that I've been saying in this video? Light grays, fog, smoke, things like that. This game is perfect for banding. Same with the other games that I named. God of War is, other than that, gorgeous, but there are some areas in caves where you'll see some banding. Call of Duty World War II had a perfect scene with some banding in it. So run those tests, guys, and then that way you'll know if your display is good. Chances of you finding one that's perfect are nearly impossible. It's just part of the technology. But look at it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'm sure I'll get a bunch of comments saying their TVs are perfectly clear. I'm here to tell you guys that have banding. It is an issue on a lot of displays. I've heard a lot of it on the Vizio Quantum. I've heard a lot on the TCLs. But that's a lot of them that have defective panels. Or that's just something that is due to the color gradient. That's not what's happening with mine. It's just part of it when the storm is perfect and you see certain things come together. It's playable. I don't love it. It's probably in 5% of the content that I watch, so I'm good with it. So thank you as always, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. Run these tests on your displays. Find a game like this and then run some tests on YouTube. You'll see them for vertical banding. You'll see them for grayscale. Check that out. Look at your DSC tests and see, or DSE tests, and see how you are. All right, guys. Thank you as always. This is Brian from Whisper Status, and I will talk to you soon.